Video contains violent content, details that are not suitable for common perception. Please consider before watching. Chapter 62. A smile that reached his ears. Sometimes someone's smiling face can lower the other person's guard. However, the moment the boy saw that smile in response to his plea for help, he felt a strong malice that went beyond mere repulsion. Flinch. This caused him to falter in his steps. But the other two boys weren't like that. Huff huff. Hey, help us. Some monster-like wolf is chasing us. They ran towards Mok Jae-young, pleading for help. At this, the boy shouted in alarm. Wait a moment, stop. Before he could even finish his words. The moment the boy who had run over to ask for help reached right in front of him, Mok Jae-young naturally grabbed his neck and twisted it. Crack. Kook. With a final scream, the boy with the broken neck collapsed to the ground. Startled by this sight, the other boy stumbled backward in shock. Hick. Thud. As Mok Jae-young approached the fallen boy. Why, you bastard, what are you doing? The boy who had stopped due to a bad feeling shouted. In response, Mok Jae-young laughed nonchalantly and lightly leaped, pushing his palm and kicking the head of the fallen boy who was trying to dodge backward. Crack. He kicked so hard that the boy's head was bent backward. The way his mouth gaped open, he seemed to have met his end. Seeing this, the boy was at a loss for words. This crazy bastard. Even if they were in a competitive relationship, this wasn't a situation where they were fighting over a flag. Yet he killed the other party who asked for help as soon as they met. What kind of madman does that? It was absurd. Oink oink. From behind, the sound of pig-like squeals could be heard. Along with it, the bushes rustled. Shit. A rough sound escaped the boy's mouth. He was truly caught between a rock and a hard place. Behind him was a monstrous beast, and in front of him stood a madman indiscriminately slaughtering others. No, perhaps the saying, a tiger in front and a wolf behind, was more fitting. Do or die. The boy, whose face was covered in cold sweat, chose neither the front nor the back but the steep cliff to the right. Ah! With a shout, the boy launched his body to the right. Whether it was the front or the back, if he was going to lose his life either way, he had no choice but to take a gamble. At that moment, he felt a strange sensation of something pulling the back of his head. With that, the body of the boy who was about to fall suddenly floated backward and flew back. Then, puck. The boy's head was grasped by Mok Jae-young's hand. The boy's eyes widened. What was this? It wasn't directly pulled by hand. Could it be the so-called empty space grasping, where a profound inner expert could pull objects or something with their true chi? That's impossible. It was hard to believe. How could this guy who was the same age as him possess such profound true chi? Moreover, their meridians were currently sealed by the Jamunso. So how did he do it? At that moment, oink oink, along with the pig-like squeals, a large wolf with a red head and rat-like eyes emerged through the bushes. Between its bared sharp teeth was a mouthful of bloody flesh. Seeing this, Mok Jae-young raised an eyebrow and muttered. And what's this? The boy whose head was grasped spoke hastily in a frightened voice. I told you. Some monster-like thing was chasing us. So it was that? This isn't the time for that, we need to run away. Although he said that, it seemed too late already. The distance between the monstrous beast and them was at most 20 to 25 steps. It was too close to run away from that beast, which was as fast as a horse. Oink oink. The beast walked forward, drooling profusely. As if it thought it could catch them at any time, it narrowed the distance step by step. Feeling extreme fear from this, the boy muttered in a dazed voice. Shit. It's all because of you. Before the boy could finish his words, Mok Jae-young released his hand from the boy's head and quickly formed hand seals. Puck, 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 soldier, fight, rupture, formation. They were the hand seals of the 9-character vitality technique. What the is he doing? As the boy wondered, Mok Jae-young made a square with the index and middle fingers of both hands and aimed it at the approaching beast. Then, swoosh. 4 invisible pillars soared around the approaching beast. At that moment, Mok Jae-young said softly, 4 peaks linking technique. Then surfaces were created by the 4 pillars that had become terrifyingly thick. The boy couldn't see it, but it was clearly visible to the beast's eyes that this had blocked it, so it stopped and rolled its eyes. Then, as if it had decided to forcibly break through, it launched its body. Puck. Squeal. The beast that had launched its body like that crashed into something and bounced back. What? The boy couldn't understand this sight. Nothing was visible, so why was that monster-like beast acting like that? Could it be that this guy did something? At that moment, Mok Jeon made a gesture of opening his palm towards the trapped beast and then clenching it. Contract. Swoosh. At that instant, the four surfaces trapping the beast rapidly compressed. As the space narrowed, the beast seemed to panic and began thrashing around. Seeing the beast like this, Mok Jeon clenched his hand even tighter. Oink oink. Crack crack crack. The intervals of the beast's thrashing narrowed. At the moment when the intervals had narrowed to the point where it was difficult to move, the beast bristled the red fur on its head, and then let out a tremendous roar. Squeal. Ack. The sound was so loud that the boy covered his ears. Mok Jeon endured this and tried to clench his hand to crush the beast to death. But, crack crack crack. At that moment, cracks appeared on the compressing surfaces. Then, crash. The four peaks linking technique shattered in an instant and the beast leaped out. Damn. When a spell imbued with spell power is broken, the backlash is suffered by the caster. Mok Jeon's body was pushed back about 2 steps. Swish. Oink oink. The beast that had leaped out excitedly scraped the ground with its feet and let out a fierce roar. Hick. At this, the boy who had been covering his ears panicked and tried to back away while supporting himself with his hands. However, the beast that had leaped out, contrary to its fierce roar, stared intently at Mok Jeon, then turned its body and disappeared into the bushes as if fleeing. Huff huff huff. Seeing that sight, the boy who had been frightened let out a sigh of relief. It was hard to believe even after experiencing it. To think he had driven away such a monster-like being in a bizarre way. Then a voice was heard near his ears. Why are you feeling relieved? The boy, whose eyes had widened, tried to hastily get up. But it was already too late. Mok Jeon twisted the neck of the boy who was trying to get up. Crack. After the boy died, Mok Jeon absorbed the death chi starting from the boy he had killed first using the Tak ritual. It was because the longer it took, the more death chi would dissipate. Only after finishing absorbing the death chi did he open his mouth. That red-headed wolf from earlier, what was it? Well, it's my first time seeing it directly, but judging from its appearance and pig-like squeals, it seems to be a Galgio. Galgio. It's a man-eating fierce beast that inhabits the northern sea near Mount Beihao. I know it's a man-eating beast. Its appearance alone was completely different from ordinary beasts. Moreover, being a man-eating beast, it must have been affected by sorcery. Rather, seeing how it broke the four peaks linking technique, it didn't seem to be a low-grade man-eating beast, so he asked. Judging from how it broke the spell, it doesn't seem to be of a low grade. According to Sorcerer Zhou Yuigong, the four peaks linking technique was originally created to eliminate vengeful spirits, so it could only handle the lowest grade of monstrous beasts. The grades of man-eating beasts were divided into vicious beasts, monstrous beasts, demonic beasts, devil beasts, spiritual beasts, and supreme beasts. To Mok Jeon's words, Chong Ryong replied, I heard that a mature Galgio is called a monstrous beast. However, based on its size earlier, it's not fully grown yet. It's not fully grown? Yes. Even so, it will be incomparably stronger than ordinary vicious beasts. It probably possesses strength somewhere between a fierce beast and a monstrous beast. As I thought. That seemed to be the reason why the four peaks linking technique was broken. It exceeded the capacity that the technique could handle. For a man-eating beast like the Galgio, it was nothing more than a way to buy time, so there was no need to use this technique. Mok Jeon got up from his spot and said, This is troublesome. Why? Are you suddenly scared now that you can't use your internal energy and the spells you learn don't work well? If that's really the case, I will. No. That's not it. I think we need to hurry. Hurry? Before that man-eating beast interferes with my meal, I should move more diligently. No, it might be better to deal with it first. So that was his perspective. He was worried that the man-eating beast would kill more boys than him. Chong Ryong clicked her tongue inwardly. Meanwhile, the group led by Yong Jie from Vermilion Slaughter Valley was moving cautiously. However, 3 of them were grunting while jointly carrying the lump of metal at the bottom of the flag, and the rest were sticking close to them in a circle. One of the boys carrying the lump of metal complained, No. If we're going to find a different type of flag, why do we have to carry this like this? Can't we just break off the upper part and go? In response to the boy's complaint, Yom Jie from Vermilion Slaughter Valley urged. Stop grumbling and do as you're told. If my prediction is correct, you guys will have to thank me. At these words, the boys shook their heads from side to side. Did it make sense to them that the monster-like beast avoided them simply because it was scared of the flag? No matter how much they thought about it, they couldn't understand. Rather than inefficiently carrying the flag like this, they thought it would be better to just break the flagpole and move quickly to seize or find another flag. But then, as they were doing that, a sound was heard from somewhere. Oink oink. Startled by the sound, they stopped in their tracks. It was definitely that thing. Rustle, rustle. The bushes in the northwest direction rustled, and soon the beast revealed itself. Seeing this, the boys were about to put down the flag they were carrying and prepare to run away, but stay still. Yom Jie from Vermilion Slaughter Valley dissuaded them. No, they should either run away or join forces to confront it, but what did he mean by staying still? As they were thinking that, the beast looked at the flag they were holding, then raised its ears in alarm, turned its body and went back into the bushes. Huh. The beast really ran away after seeing the flag. At this, Yom Jie from Vermilion Slaughter Valley spoke in a triumphant voice. See. He confirmed that his judgment was correct. But after confirming this, a sudden thought occurred to him. If we do it well, we might be able to use it. There were probably few people who knew that the flag served as protection. The corners of Yom Jie from Vermilion Slaughter Valley's mouth curled up bitterly. Chapter 63. Not far from the valley where the steel marble competition took place and the mountain where the flag battle was unfolding, there was another cave there. Creak, creak. 5 carriages in a procession headed towards that cave. Red-belted warriors were pulling the carriages and entering the cave illuminated by torches. The carriages that had entered the cave like that stopped at a certain place. There numerous bodies of boys were lying down. Phew. Is this the last of them? Then shall we move them? The red-belted warriors who had pulled the carriages started the task of laying the corpses side by side. The remaining carriages that arrived one after another were the same. Plop. Is it because we took them out late? The bodies are bloated. A red-belted warrior clicked his tongue while looking at a corpse that was swollen with water. Although it was shallow valley water, there were deep parts, so it seemed the entire body had been submerged. Then a middle-aged man wearing a Taoist robe with yin and yang drawn on it approached and said, "Exclude that one. Isn't this much fine? We can't perform the work with this." Oh my. At this, the red-belted warriors moved the corpse to a carriage on the left side of the cave. As they were moving the corpse to the carriage, one warrior couldn't hold back and vomited. Bleck. Seeing this warrior, the other warriors clicked their tongues. Tsk tisk. As expected of a rookie. Of course they said that, but they actually understood. At least the corpses lying over there had few wounds, so they still retained human form. However, the ones in the carriage were the dropouts. None of them were intact. Having crushed heads was common, and there were many missing a leg or with organs torn out. It was so horrific that it made one want to vomit just by looking. Get it together. Rookie. Ah, yes, sir. The warrior who had thrown up the contents of his stomach barely got up and replied. As the corpse sorting work was somewhat finished like that, the dropouts nearly filled 3 carriages. Then the middle-aged man in the Taoist robe from earlier approached the warriors and said, "Let's go." The Taoist-robed middle-aged man led the way, and the red-belted warriors pulled the carriages piled with corpses. The carriages moved along a narrow sloped path and stopped in front of a cliff at the foot of the mountain after half a sikhen. The Taoist-robed middle-aged man took out a handful of something from his bosom. They were talismans. Was written on them, and the Taoist-robed middle-aged man said as he attached a talisman one by one to the dead corpses on the carriages. "When throwing them, don't look down the cliff." "Yes, sir." The red-belted warriors, who answered nonchalantly, threw the corpses with talismans attached off the cliff one after another in a familiar manner. Seeing this, the rookie warrior was inwardly baffled. If they were unusable corpses, it would be cleaner to just burn them, but if they threw them all in a place like this, wouldn't the bottom be overflowing with corpses? Even in broad daylight, it would be too horrific to muster the courage to go down. The rookie warrior asked his senior, who was also carrying corpses. "Senior, why are we throwing them off this cliff instead of just burning them? Just do as you're told. Why are you being curious?" Sorry." As the rookie shut his mouth in dejection, the senior clicked his tongue and said in a low voice, Listen and let it go in one ear and out the other. From what I've heard, the stream flowing down from this cliff connects to a branch of the cave below. What does that have to do with this? I told you I don't know. Something about becoming nutrients or whatever, but for lowly folks like us, we just need to do as we're told. You'll only bring trouble upon yourself by needlessly having doubts. Got it? Yes, sir. Nutrients. What the was becoming nutrients? He couldn't understand it all. Come to think of it, they said they did this every time the barrier of the Corpse Blood Valley was conducted, so just how many corpses have been discarded below this cliff? Even now it exceeded 100. Utter. Without thinking, he looked down and for a moment, goosebumps rose all over his body. It felt like something ominous and unpleasant was creeping up from the darkness that seemed to suck him in. Gasp. Just then someone grabbed his shoulder. It was the man in the Taoist robe who had been attaching the talismans. The man in the Taoist robe said to the startled rookie warrior in a low voice, "What did I say earlier?" "Pardon? I asked what I said earlier." "Ah, not to look down the cliff." "Then it's best to never look down." "Why, yes." To the flustered rookie, the man in the Taoist robe warned in a meaningful tone, "You may be bewitched." Bewitched? What did that mean? It was around the time when a Shurchen and 2 Ku had passed since the flag defense battle began. As a considerable amount of time had elapsed, nearly half of the flags had been discovered by the boys, and the fighting to defend and seize them was in full swing. However, an unexpected variable occurred within this flag defense battle. That was the appearance of the man-eating beast, the Galgio. It was already incomparably more brutal than regular beasts, and it could be said to be the worst variable for the boys whose internal energy was sealed and had no weapons. In particular, the boys who were searching here and there alone to find flags without their teammates were being indiscriminately attacked and killed. Chomp. Arg. Another boy was caught by the Galgio in the middle of the mountainside. The Galgio liked human heads, so it crushed and devoured them with its vicious teeth every time it caught one. It didn't even eat the other parts. As a result, corpses with crushed heads were being discovered in various parts of the mountain, heightening the boys' vigilance to an extreme level. Shit. What is this? Are you sure they ended up like this from fighting? A group that had not yet found a flag was shocked upon discovering a corpse. This was definitely not a trace of having died while fighting. Even if internal energy is sealed, they couldn't have been caught by a beast, right? You're right. These are teeth marks. No matter how much of a beast it is, can it completely chew up a head? Even a tiger would have gnawed on the skull, no? A corpse with its head completely missing. No matter how they looked at it, they couldn't understand. Mok Yuchion, who was with them, had dark circles under his eyes. This place was truly like hell. While engaging in a flag-seizing battle, he had lost 3 boys who were his comrades, and now the 5 of them were wandering around looking for another flag. But in the process he had seen over 20 corpses. Among them, only about 3 seemed to have died while fiercely fighting over a flag, and the rest had met bizarre deaths. 10 corpses without heads like this one, and he had discovered 7 corpses that had died cleanly. Most of them had their necks broken. Not all of them had their necks broken, but most seemed to have been killed in a similar manner. It didn't seem like they had engaged in hand-to-hand combat or fought fiercely, but rather died without being able to properly resist against someone. Just what? Those who killed like this seemed to have lost their lives unrelated to the flags. The problem lay in this. The flag battle alone was already making everyone struggle with bloodshot eyes, but it seemed that unknown beings were killing boys left and right. Just who is doing these things? About 200 jang east from where Mok Yuchion was, on the middle of the mountainside. One of the culprits he was curious about had his hand on the chest of a headless corpse, absorbing death chi. It was none other than Mok Jiongun. Mok Jiongun, who had been quickly absorbing death chi, soon removed his hand. And as if displeased, he muttered, "It's lacking." "You mean death chi?" "Yes. Of course it would be. For corpses attacked by man-eating beasts, most of the chi they possessed rapidly depletes as it gets devoured." At Chong Ryong's words, Mok Jiongun clicked his tongue. Even the chi that comes out upon death depletes this quickly. It was quite troublesome. He had diligently moved to kill more boys than the Galgio, a man-eating beast, to obtain death chi, but he was falling behind instead. It's starting to annoy me a bit. Unlike himself, who needed time to absorb death chi, this Galgio, a man-eating beast, would just gobble up the heads and go after another prey. It should be full enough by now, but it kept eating endlessly. It feels like I'm eating someone else's leftovers. Why are you doing that? But this bastard seems to be eating a lot more than I thought. Mok Jae-un shrugged and said, it doesn't seem to be full. No. It's a lot even considering that. It should be full enough by now, but it's eating quite a lot. It may be because it's in a period of active growth. I see. What is it? It might be a fellow that's right before becoming an adult. An adult. Yes. Among man-eating beasts, there are those that require a lot of chi for reproduction or to become adults. So Galgio is that type? Perhaps. At Chong Ryong's words, Mok Jae-un stroked his chin as if troubled. If this guy kept eating like this, his share would be significantly reduced. Thus, Mok Jae-un decided to change directions. This won't do. I'll have to catch that Galgio first. He had thought that leaving it alone would cause chaos around him and actually benefit him. But in the current state, it was rather a hindrance. So Mok Jae-un made up his mind to kill the Galgio first. How? Can you help me? You said you could do it alone, but even you can't help it in this situation, ah? Chong Ryong snorted and said, then take me out of this cramped place. At this, Mok Jae-un held the wooden puppet she was in, formed hand seals and chanted a spell. The origin connects to the earth, the 9 turns return to the source, release. Swoosh. Eventually, a large shadow appeared from the wooden puppet, and Chong Ryong slowly revealed herself holding a long pipe. Having come out, she stretched and said as if refreshed. As expected, it's much better than being trapped. Phew. Chong Ryong took a puff from the long pipe and exhaled a long trail of smoke. To her, Mok Jae-un said, can you confirm where that thing is? No, if you can eliminate it, Chong Ryong, that would be fine too. I'll do that even without you pestering me. Just wait. Poof. Chong Ryong soon soared into the sky. Unlike a demonic beast, she was of a higher class, so even without possessing a body, the range in which she could move was extremely wide. Chong Ryong, who had flown higher than the treetops like that, surveyed the surroundings. Her blood-red ghostly eyes slowly swept over the entire mountain. But Chong Ryong, who had been looking around, raised an eyebrow. She had thought that if it was obsessed with eating humans to that extent, she would find it quickly, but contrary to her expectations, the beast was not visible to her ghostly eyes. If it was right before becoming a monstrous beast, its appetite should be overflowing, so it was strange. Where the hell did it go? Was it not in this vicinity? Thus Chong Ryong flew even higher. It was because she thought the Galgio might have moved to a more distant place. As she was looking around like that, flinch. Her gaze was fixed on somewhere. Ha! An exclamation naturally flowed out of Chong Ryong's mouth. When she was inside the wooden puppet, she couldn't sense the external chi, so she had no way of knowing this. But now she couldn't help but see it. No, it would be strange if her eyes and ears weren't drawn to this tremendous thing. From the distant cliff she was looking at, countless screams were spreading upward. So she immediately descended. Mok Jae-un asked, did you find it already? No. I didn't see it. More importantly, you better quickly follow me now. At her somewhat excited voice, Mok Jae-un couldn't hide his puzzlement. Regardless of that, Chong Ryong flew ahead as if guiding him somewhere. So Mok Jae-un followed her. Wasn't that far. That place, 2 ku away, was located deep in the boundary of the mountain towards a certain cliff. Looking at the ground. Wheel tracks. The sloped path was full of wheel tracks as if carriages had been pulled. As he was proceeding with bewilderment, flinch. Mok Jae-un's steps momentarily faltered at the ominous chi spreading from ahead. What in the world is this? Ever since his ghost eyes opened and his sixth sense awakened, he couldn't help but become sensitive to such things. So why hadn't he noticed this until now? With suspicion he surveyed the surroundings. Then he discovered something. The talismans and carved spells attached between the cliffs and trees. They were controlling the ominousness flowing out so it couldn't escape outside. But even with this many talismans attached, as he approached closer, just what was there for such tremendous ominousness to leak out to this extent? When he reached the place where the wheel tracks ended, he saw Chong Ryong sitting on the edge of the cliff smoking a long pipe. Do you see it? At her question, Mok Jae-un's flesh trembled. Hey, Park, save me, please, please. The endless screams spreading from below. Along with those sounds, ominous chi that made the skin feel prickly was crashing upwards as if desperate to climb up but unable to do so. Take a closer look. Mok Jae-eun approached the edge of the cliff and looked down. Ah! It was like a bottomless pit. Countless resentments were intermingled, spewing out endless malice and ominousness. Even with talismans attached all over the cliff, if it was to this extent, those with weak mental strength might lose consciousness just by looking at it. Kid, do you know what goo poison is? How could I not know? There was almost nothing he didn't know about medicinal herbs and poisons. Of course, he had never directly seen goo poison, but he remembered what he heard from his grandfather. It was a secret art originating from the Nanman region where dozens or hundreds of poisonous creatures were put into a jar and the lid was not opened until only one survived. The worst one that survived like that was called goo poison. Why are you asking that? Chong Ryong said with the corners of her mouth twitching. There's goo poison down there. Chapter 64. Dozens or hundreds of poisonous creatures are put into a jar and the lid is not opened until only one survives. The worst one that survives like that is called goo poison. Mok Jae-eun, looking down at the cliff that was like a bottomless pit, asked in a puzzled voice. Goo poison? Yes. Can't you hear them? These screams. He could hear them. Very clearly at that. Kaya. Park. Save me. Please. Please. The screams of vengeful spirits suffering in agony were soaring upward. This was the first time he had seen this many vengeful spirits wailing together. If taken individually, they were only at the red spirit level and nothing special, but with hundreds, no thousands of vengeful spirits gathered in one place, it was truly a scene of hell. Take a closer look. Your eyes should be able to see it. At Chong Ryong's words, Mok Jae-eun stared intently at the bottom. The vengeful spirits wailing there were stretching their hands upward as if yearning for freedom, but iron chains were bound to their ankles and wrists. Clang clang. Those are. You should know well since you learned sorcery. You've done it once too, kid. At her words, Gokun flashed through Mok Jae-eun's mind. Originally, Mok Jae-eun had used sorcery to turn a soul that would naturally go to the afterlife into a vengeful spirit. The method wasn't very difficult. It was enough to somehow hold the departing soul in this world and taint it with the chi of death. Ha! The corners of Mok Jae-eun's mouth twitched. It was quite a sight to behold. That enormous number of dead souls were trapped under this narrow cliff and transformed into vengeful spirits. This was absolutely not something that happened by chance. It occurred forcibly. It couldn't be anything but a horrific deed. However, while looking at this, Mok Jae-eun was more intrigued than surprised. Truly peculiar. Seeing this, Chong Ryong clicked her tongue. No matter how she looked at it, this guy's thinking was far from that of ordinary humans. But it didn't matter. Right now, her only thought was that whether it be an evil spirit or whatever, as long as it could resolve her deep resentment, it was fine. Chong Ryong said, You should know that there are grades even among vengeful spirits, right? That's right. How strong of an obsessive grudge did they have before dying? How long did they hold that resentment? It's influenced by such things. But that's not the only way grades are determined. It can also be achieved in other forms? Yes. Don't you see it now? Chong Ryong pointed somewhere with her long pipe. That place was the darkest spot at the bottom of the cliff that was like a bottomless pit. That one spot was particularly invisible. But upon closer look, an astonishing sight could be seen. They're being dragged. Yes. The screaming vengeful spirits. Those vengeful spirits were being forcibly dragged to that one place as if being absorbed. The vengeful spirits were desperately resisting, but due to the chains restraining them, they were being sucked in one by one. Every time that happened, the dark space kept growing larger and larger. I understand what you mean now. Mok Jae-eun now grasped the meaning of what she had said. The meaning of the word, goo poison. When vengeful spirits are together in one place, there may be cases where they don't clash. But if they are restrained and confined in one place, unable to escape, they're harming each other. No, I should say they're devouring each other. Yes. Mere ghosts were devouring each other and transforming into the worst form in one place. And that transformation into the worst was probably that dark spot. A darkness that made one shudder just by looking at it. Goo poison ha. It was a fitting name. How much had the vengeful spirit that remained alone like that transformed into the worst form? At the very least, it was definitely above a yellow spirit, no, a green spirit. Mok Jae-young glanced at Chong Ryung. Perhaps. It might be the process of forming a vengeful spirit on par with her. As that thought occurred to him, he suddenly drooled. Then Chong Ryung said, "Now's the chance." Chance. A complete goo poison hasn't been born yet. I don't know how much of the worst they're trying to create, but if you can absorb even a little of that chi, it will have a greater effect than killing them one by one. This was the reason Chong Ryung had brought Mok Jae-young here. Killing boys and absorbing death chi was naturally a way to become stronger, but the bottom of this cliff was a concentration of vengeful spirits to create goo poison. The chi formed in that process had a different potency than ordinary death chi. It's already overflowing, so if you perform the art of binding here, you'll be able to sufficiently receive the chi. I suppose so. Hurry up and do it. At her words, Mok Jae-young shook his head. What? Don't tell me you're scared. No. Then why are you refusing to do it? I'm not refusing. Rather than doing it here, I'm more tempted by that. What Mok Jae-young pointed at was none other than the dark spot. At this, Chong Ryung furrowed her brows. Then she spoke as if it was absurd. Are you crazy and want to die? Pardon. That place is the very torrent where vengeful spirits are devouring each other and transforming. And you're saying you'll go there as a living being? Is it not possible? Hey brat. Yes. There are still hundreds of individual vengeful spirits that haven't been devoured. And if you enter that whirlpool, you may end up being devoured instead. Discard your unnecessary bravado. It was a sincere warning. Even if they were restrained, they were vengeful spirits. If those things came surging like a wave all at once, there was no telling what would happen. You'll die showing off with the meager sorcery you've barely learned. Be satisfied with the overflowing chi here as I told you. At Chong Ryung's words, Mok Jae-young smiled brightly. Then he approached the edge of the cliff. Hey! Chong Ryung urged the approaching Mok Jae-young. To her, Mok Jae-young said while looking at the dark spot. Even if I take the risk, if I can absorb that concentrated chi, won't I become much stronger than now? You crazy bastard. You may die before becoming strong. If it seemed easy from the beginning, do you think I would stop you? The vengeful spirits that were not only trapped but also devouring and being devoured had become agitated. That alone was dangerous, yet he was going to take that risk? This guy had really lost all sense of fear, too much at that. It had been like that since their first encounter, but he too easily risked his life if necessary. You and I are one and the same. I don't want us to recklessly commit double suicide. As if I would ever wish for Chong Ryung to die. Then back away. Didn't you say it, Chong Ryung? What? That with my current strength, I can't do anything within heaven and earth society. Even if the risk is great, wouldn't it be better to seize the opportunity in any way possible? Enduring hardship and tasting bitterness or whatever, waiting idly doesn't suit my nature. Poof. As soon as those words ended, Mok Jae-young jumped off towards the side of the cliff where the slope was relatively gentle. Chong Ryung waved her hand, trying to pull Mok Jae-young back up. But she was blocked by the chi of the vengeful spirits rising from the cliff. Rather, a useless vengeful spirit was pulled up and... sizzle. It got caught in the barrier blocking the top of the cliff and was incinerated. At this, Chong Ryung burst out in anger. Damn you, kid. He finally went down there. She had warned him not to, but he ignored it. If it weren't for being bound by the cord of the flesh-eating supreme ruler, she would have wanted to leave him to die like that. But she couldn't leave him like that. You're making me annoyed. Whoosh. Chong Ryung launched her body downward, following Mok Jae-young. The spell power of the talismans was enveloping the surroundings, making even considerable oddities reluctant to pass through, but she forcefully parted it. Crack, crack, crack. It's a flesh body. Living one. It's alive. It was a mess as he descended along the gentle slope. The cries of vengeful spirits echoed in his ears. It's incomparable indeed. At the top of the cliff, numerous talismans were attached, suppressing the chi. But when he actually came down, it was tremendous. It was as if he had entered a torrent. The vengeful spirits noticed his presence and quickly approached, and each and every one of them was coveting Mok Jae-young's flesh body. Mok Jae-young, who had been descending the cliff as if sliding, brought his hands together and formed hand seals. Puck, 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 puck. Presence. Soldier. Fight. Those. Formation. Line up. Front. They were the hand seals of the 9-character vitality technique. By performing all 9 hand seals consecutively, the spell varies according to the final hand seal. Here if he performed the Hupjanjan, Anjali Madral, with his palms joined together, swish, numerous threads connected around Mok Jayongun forming a sphere. This was a barrier to repel oddities. To properly perform the 9 character hand seals of the 9 character vitality technique, a medium was needed to aid the talismans or spells, and Mok Jayongun had a ring on his left index finger. It was given to him by diviner Zhou Yuigong. It contained a spell that allowed him to use the full range of the 9 character vitality technique. Is this a barrier? It's quite useful. A barrier refers to tying a certain space according to a purpose. Crack 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 crack. Can't approach. What is this? It's blocked. The vengeful spirits at the ghost level that had been approaching closely were bounced off. The hand seals of the 9 character vitality technique could easily handle and repel even red spirits. Like that, while maintaining the Hupjanjan with his hands joined, Mok Jayongun slid all the way down and felt the slope becoming steeper at a certain point. I think I need to grab on. It seemed he had to grab the cliff and climb down. But when he looked below, he saw water pooled there. It wasn't visible from above, but if it was that deep, it seemed sufficient to jump into. Puck. Mok Jayongun pushed off with both feet, and he jumped towards the place with water. Fush. As expected. The water wasn't very deep. Should he say it was about twice his height in depth? So he tried to swim up, but... The screams of vengeful spirits reached his ears. They came from the bottom of the water, and before he knew it, something white was visible around him. Hands. They were hands. Pale white hands as if swollen with water without a hint of blood. Just looking at them was extremely eerie. Those hands suddenly wriggled and rose up, trying to grab Mok Jayongun's ankles. Crack crack crack. But since he hadn't released the Hupjanjan yet, they were blocked by the barrier of the 9 character vitality technique. Good thing I didn't release it. He thought, but something was quite different. The red spirits at the ghost level had easily bounced off the barrier. But the palms had bounced off the barrier yet didn't give up trying to grab him. Then soon, tap 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 tap. The palms adhered to the barrier like an octopus's suckers. They were enduring the barrier. Suddenly he remembered what he had seen in the basic writings of the school of Yin and Yang. Oddities in water are more dangerous than ordinary oddities. So this is what it meant? At this level they weren't red spirits but vermilion spirits. Judging it to be somewhat dangerous, Mok Jayongun kicked his feet while maintaining the Hupjanjan. He had to somehow rise to the surface. Splash 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 splash. Then before he knew it, numerous hands surged up from the bottom. They grabbed the spherical barrier surrounding Mok Jayongun and tried to pull it down. Park. This is troublesome. At this rate he wouldn't be able to reach the surface. Although he could hold his breath better than ordinary people, it would be dangerous if it prolonged. Crack crack crack. Just then cracks appeared on the barrier where numerous palms were clinging. It seemed like it would shatter at any moment. Mok Jayongun frowned. In that case. Puck. Mok Jayongun changed the hand seal from Hupjanjan to Jumgangji Vajramadral, by raising only his middle fingers. At that moment, swish, the spherical barrier burst out and a strong force simultaneously pushed away the palms. Not missing this opportunity, Mok Jayongun kicked his legs powerfully and rose out of the water. He tried to swim to the shore, but he felt the hands that had been bounced off from below all rushing up to grab him at once. Swish. Right at that moment. Mok Jayongun's body suddenly floated by something. Then he was sent flying to the shore. But, roughly flying over, Mok Jayongun rolled on the ground twice and got up. Someone gracefully descended next to Mok Jayongun. It was none other than Chong Ryong. Damn you kid. You really won't listen to my words. As she expressed her annoyance, Mok Jayongun smiled brightly and said, Phew. You came just in time. What? Just in time? I thought Chong Ryong would surely help me. At Mok Jayongun's words, Chong Ryong was about to smack his head with her long pipe but held back. The impudent kid was desperate to use her. Anyway, it seemed to be her fate to be entangled with this guy. Just then, swoosh swoosh. The white hands rose from the water and approached in the direction where Mok Jayongun was. At this, Chong Ryong turned her head and glared at the hands with her blood-red eyes. And in a low voice she said, He's mine. Prem young ones. No sooner had those words ended. The The numerous hands that had been targeting Mok Jae-eun trembled as if having a seizure, then promptly went back into the water. Chapter 65. Is it the difference in grade? Mok Jae-eun's eyes gleamed with interest at the pale white hands returning to the water after just one warning. Indeed, with her grade reaching the level of a blue spirit, even her overwhelming presence alone dominates ordinary vengeful spirits. You're truly amazing as expected. At Mok Jae-eun's praise, Chong Ryong, who had chased away the water vengeful spirits, spoke in an annoyed voice. Do you think I said it was dangerous because of these low-grade ones? Of course not. Mok Jae-eun shrugged his shoulders. Naturally, if they were just red spirits or vermilion spirits, she wouldn't have warned him. What she was warning about was that thing transforming into the worst goo poison by devouring each other. Goo. The area about 40 jang away was covered in a thick fog. It was so dark that the inside was barely visible. If it were a simple fog it would be better, but a pitch-black fog was swirling like a huge torrent, and just looking at it felt extremely ominous. That's not the only problem. Are you also talking about those? Besides that thing that had engulfed an entire space, there were also smaller ones. Those also formed small fogs and were chaotically entangled, and something seemed amiss about them. Chong Ryong spoke while looking at those. Low-grade vengeful spirits that are no match for me will feel fear and hasten to flee like those just now. But those are different. What do you mean by different? Vengeful spirits that have coveted and devoured each other see nothing. What does that mean? They are devouring each other to survive and become stronger. Those things see nothing right now. They only have the thought that they must devour. That's why Chong Ryong advised not to approach them closely. No matter how much lower their grade is and how weak they are compared to her, if those that have gone mad and turned into hungry ghosts rush at them all at once with determination, it becomes difficult to protect. Hey kid, do you think you can penetrate through those and absorb that? I'll have to try. You reckless bastard. That was too dangerous. Rather, there was a possibility of being devoured, so she wanted to forcibly pull him up even now. While she was thinking that, Mok Jae-eun looked around. There was only an ominous feeling, and not a trace of human presence could be felt at all. Thus Mok Jae-eun muttered, I think it'll be fine here. What are you saying? At Chong Ryong's question, Mok Jae-eun suddenly fumbled around the back of his waist near his spine and placed his palm there. Then he pressed down at a spot with his finger. Phew. What are you trying to do now? Should I say I'm half believing and half doubting, since it was something I had been contemplating whether to try or not? What? As she questioned back. Mok Jae-eun's back curved, and then he slightly furrowed his brows. He was someone who wouldn't even blink an eye at ordinary pain, so how much pain must it be for him to act like this? Just what are you? Chong Ryong's eyes gleamed with interest. It was none other than the needle, about the size of a finger joint, dangling from Mok Jae-eun's finger. The end of this needle, shaped like a hook, was none other than the Golden Gate Lock. It was used to seal meridians and restrict internal energy. Originally, this Golden Gate Lock could only be removed using a special tool with strong magnetism, but Mok Jae-eun removed it using the art of binding. To utilize the art of binding in this way, the meridian near the spine where the Golden Gate Lock was inserted was extremely dangerous. Therefore, even though it could be risky, he removed it by adjusting the art of binding without any hesitation. Could be called bold. Really are. Wait a moment. I need to remove the remaining two first. Mok Jae-eun removed the remaining two Golden Gate Lock just like he had done earlier. Inserting the Golden Gate Lock into the acupoints of the spine is painful, but removing it is even more agonizing, yet there was no change in his expression even the second time. Could be called tremendous endurance. Puck. The moment Mok Jae-eun completely removed the inserted Golden Gate Lock, swoosh, the sealed meridians opened and the restriction was lifted. The death chi he had gathered until now circulated throughout his body, and his energy became abundant. Look at this. Chong Ryong's eyes narrowed. When his meridians were closed, the chi wasn't manifested, so she couldn't estimate how much death chi he had gathered, but this exceeded her expectations. It had already surpassed twice the amount of death chi he originally possessed. If he could digest that, his internal energy alone would reach the beginning of the peak stage. It's almost miraculous. Death chi differs from ordinary chi. Could be said to be almost the opposite, and Mok Jae-eun would be the only human possessing that much of the chi of death. Now, was that guy really human? In the first place, It was strange for him to be fine while possessing such an enormous amount of the chi of death. Flinch. Chong Ryong looked around and smirked. The low-grade vengeful spirits nearby were feeling fear from the tremendous death chi emanating from Mok Jaeon. Mok Jaeon stretched and said, "It feels refreshing. It was suffocating to keep this damn thing inserted. Did you endure it on purpose?" "Yes. Just in case." He had heard that highly skilled experts could sense the chi of inferiors. That's why Mok Jaeon had thought of this method from the moment the Golden Gate lock was first inserted, but he had been enduring it. Chong Ryong clicked her tongue and said, "So you didn't come down here recklessly. With this much, apart from that huge one, there were only a few entities here that could directly threaten Mok Jaeon. Of course, those devouring each other would indiscriminately target him. Risking one's life and committing suicide are different. You're good with words, but it's still dangerous nonetheless. Even if it's not complete yet, that thing may be more dangerous than me in some sense. Its purpose wasn't possession. It was to indiscriminately devour and complete its transformation. It would try to devour him in any way possible. Will you deal with the surrounding ones first?" Chong Ryong asked, pointing her head towards the small whirlpools. At this, Mok Jaeon shook his head. Then looking at the huge whirlpool he said, "When eating fish, you should start with the head." "You crazy bastard. Is that a fish? To call that thing eating fish starting with the head? It's a saying that the head of a fish is the most delicious part." If he was indirectly expressing his opinion to go after the strongest one first, it was typical of him. Excessive greed is overambition. But if you can make that yours as you said, it could cut down 10 years. Can you help me? Before being a supreme ruler of gluttony, do you think I'll let my disciple die? At those words, Mok Jaeon smiled brightly and said, "Because if that disciple dies, Chong Ryong the master will also die." Cut the unpleasant talk. Yes, yes. Phew. Chong Ryong took a long puff from her pipe, exhaled smoke, and pointed at the huge whirlpool of fog, saying, "I'll gather their attention here. Just focus on running forward. I'll be counting on you. Eat to your heart's content." As soon as those words ended, Chong Ryong struck the ground with her pipe. Then with her blood-red eyes glinting, she opened her mouth. "Blood realm. Gugu." At that moment, blood began to form on the ground centered around her palm. Drip drip. Blood droplets rising as if falling in reverse. The blood droplets shot up towards the sky, dyeing the surroundings red. Seeing this, Mok Jaeon thought to himself, "Ghost realm. A barrier created by a high-grade vengeful spirit. That could be called the ghost realm. Unlike the barriers deployed by sorcerers, this ghost realm was constructed by the vengeful spirit's resentment and madness converging into a space. Was it to this extent? Nearly several dozen Jang around were dyed in a bloody color. The low-grade vengeful spirits nearby trembled their spirit bodies at her resentment spreading and creating this ghost realm. Some even scattered, unable to endure it. Sizzle sizzle. Puck, puck. Just then, the small whirlpools that had been busy devouring the surrounding vengeful spirits suddenly moved. Their target was none other than Chong Ryong. By intentionally opening her realm and revealing her power, the transformed vengeful spirits that had been focused on devouring showed intense interest. Go. Poof. At Chong Ryong's words, Mok Jaeon turned to the side. Even if the attention of the transformed vengeful spirits was focused on Chong Ryong, if he passed right in front of them they might change their target. Therefore he had no choice but to go around from the side. Tap 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 tap. When he used lightness skill, the speed was tremendous. The surroundings swiftly passed by, and before long he reached the front of the huge whirlpool. The bloody realm exquisitely didn't reach here. If it had, this too would have turned its attention to Chong Ryong. It's amazing. Swish. Mok Jaeon inwardly exclaimed at the sight of the black fog swirling like rough waves. It evoked a fear that if swept away by it, one might never return. Most people know even considerable sorcerers would never dare to enter this. However, Mok Jaeon had one other thing. He had no emotion called fear. Poof. Mok Jaeon stepped into the violently raging torrent of vengeful spirits. The moment he entered, a scream that seemed to tear his eardrums echoed. Haiwia. And a stench of rotting corpses vibrated from all directions as if to numb his nose. It was as if his entire flesh would peel off, and it was painful to move even slightly. Phew. So this was why Chong Ryong had warned him. It felt as if he would be swept away by the evil and brutal qi far beyond his expectations. However, to avoid being swept away by this, Mok Jae-un circulated the death qi throughout his body using reverse cycling. Right at that moment, suddenly, a chain flew out from somewhere and coiled around Mok Jae-un's waist. At this, Mok Jae-un focused death qi into his hand and struck down. Tying. The chain was severed. But this wasn't the end. Swish. Countless chains flew in and instantly restrained Mok Jae-un's limbs. It happened in an instant, so he couldn't even avoid or resist. Grip. This strength. The chains coiled around his entire body except for his head. The binding force of these chains was so strong that no matter how much strength he used or pulled out death qi, they wouldn't budge at all. Swish. The chains that had restrained Mok Jae-un like this began to drag him towards the center of the black fog whirlpool. It wasn't something he could resist with strength. As he was being dragged, another scream was heard from somewhere. Park, save me. Please, please. It was a scream close to pleading. But as that sound got closer, something began to appear in his blurry vision. Crunch, crunch. The sound of something being eaten was heard from there. Wondering what it was eating, the lower half of a vengeful spirit in human form was seen kicking upside down. But its upper body was inside the wide-open mouth of a bizarre entity covered in chains. It was a sight that made one shudder just by looking at it. Glub, glub. The sound of the vengeful spirit being eaten came from inside the mouth, and it didn't last long. Because the lower half was also sucked into the mouth in an instant. Devouring wasn't a euphemism. It was literal. The bizarre entity covered in chains that had devoured a vengeful spirit whole let out a roar. The surroundings shook as if an earthquake had occurred. Save me, please. The vengeful spirits held by chains screamed and pleaded even more at this. They were insanely terrified. At that moment, tremble, tremble. Mok Jae-un's entire body began to tremble. Was he feeling the emotion of fear for the first time in his life? At this, the bizarre entity covered in chains that had been roaring slowly turned its gaze. Two eyes visible through the gaps in the chains emitted a gaze. I'll eat. An eerie voice echoed in all directions. Then Mok Jae-un, who had been trembling, raised his head. But his face didn't have an expression of being consumed by fear. As if all of this was exciting, his lips twitched and soon the corners of his mouth spread to his ears. Dash. The pale white eyes gleamed with interest. Mok Jae-un spoke to that bizarre entity covered in chains. Seems like our opinions coincide. Chapter 66. It was on the verge of completing its transformation, so it was gradually regaining its reason. Of course, even though reason had returned, it was still consumed by madness, so it couldn't help but feel endless hunger. That's why it indiscriminately devoured whatever it encountered. The only thing it could devour was the vengeful spirits in the same predicament as itself. For over a decade, it ate and ate these vengeful spirits trapped under this cliff, screaming and suffering. It wasn't like this from the beginning. When the vengeful spirits were devouring each other, it only ran away and hid out of the desire to survive. However, the desire to live eventually led to an explosion of resentment and madness. Consumed by madness, it had been devouring indiscriminately for over a decade. But amidst that repetitive cycle, something different intervened. It looked at the entity bound by chains as if puzzled. Human. Could it be a living being? For a long time, this place had been filled only with vengeful spirits. Periodically, new vengeful spirits would be added, but never had any living being appeared. But for a living being to appear in this hell-like place? Tremble, tremble. It couldn't contain its excitement. This ravenous hunger born from madness couldn't be quelled with just dead vengeful spirits. But a living being appearing like this was enough to stimulate its curiosity. Be afraid. Thus, it tried to bestow fear and terror upon him. The fear and dread emanating from a living being was a great source of nourishment for a vengeful spirit. However, it seems like our opinions coincide. Was this human? He was smiling in this situation. And that smile contained enough malice to be quite unpleasant. If even a little force was applied, his limbs bound by chains would be torn off, yet his relaxed attitude was utterly unpleasant. If that's the case, I shall enjoy the sight of you suffering as I tear off your limbs one by one and devour you. Mok Jae-un, who had been bound by chains, was forcibly dragged by its gesture. Knowing that strength was useless anyway, Mok Jae-un didn't resist at all. In the process, he still had a smile on his lips. It became even more enraged because he was so nonchalant. Thus, it pulled the chains right in front of it and said, "I will tear off all your skin, peel your flesh one by one, and devour you down to the bones." At its threat, Mok Jae-un smirked and said, "You have quite a noble hobby. Noble? Impudent human. To act relaxed right in front of it. Fine. Then let's see if you can still do that after experiencing pain." Puck. Swish. In an instant, one of the chains pierced into Mok Jae-un's left shoulder. Whether his liver was sticking out or he was numb to fear didn't matter. If he experienced pain, it would eventually be different. However, is this all? His expression didn't change at all and he was still smirking. If this wasn't enough, fine. As it gestured, the chains filling the ground like wriggling snakes moved as if alive. Clang. Swish. Puck puck. One chain pierced Mok Jae-un's right shoulder, and two others pierced his thighs. As if that wasn't enough, one dug into his abdomen. Puck. It wouldn't be pain that could be endured with just willpower. The chains felt extremely cold and hot, accompanied by pain that seemed to burn and freeze the moment they touched flesh and organs. Everything originated from the mind. This human would be tasting the worst pain he could experience. What was with this bastard? His expression still hadn't changed at all. Rather, he was staring intently at it while snorting. How could a living being bound by the shackles of flesh endure this pain so nonchalantly? As it was astonished, Mok Jae-un opened his mouth. "Do you think I'll be afraid or in pain from something like this? You're doing something pointless." Hurrah! As soon as Mok Jae-un's mocking words ended, the entire space violently shook as if an earthquake had occurred. He was greatly enraged. How dare a lowly being ridicule it? Fine. Then as you wish, I shall devour you alive. Swish. The chains pulled and Mok Jae-un's body with his limbs bound was dragged right in front of it. Then it opened its mouth wide. The mouth that opened between the gaps in the chains was far from human. Having been transformed by devouring countless vengeful spirits, hundreds of sharp thorns protruded, and violet smoke flowed from inside its mouth. Grerarg. Its mouth widened enough to swallow Mok Jae-un whole. Swish. The chains piercing his body loosened one by one. With a clank, Mok Jae-un's body approached the inside of the creature's mouth. Swish. It was around the time when his head to his shoulders nearly reached the gaping mouth. At that moment, something foreign fell from Mok Jae-un. Plop. It thought it was just blood or flesh falling off and didn't pay much attention. But the moment it passed through its throat, sizzle. Its throat felt like it was burning with pain. What did you? You shouldn't let your guard down just because you caught everything. The ring on Mok Jae-un's finger was no longer visible. That's right. What had entered through its throat was the ring containing the spell made by diviner Zhou Yuigong. At that moment, Mok Jae-un made a hand seal with one hand and shouted loudly. Crack crack crack. Commanding the Ink Supreme Ruler's mantra, the divine obscurity responds to the spirit, forming the myriad phenomena. The divine obscurity subdues demons like a thunderbolt, urgent as commanded. It was the Imperial Ink divine spell. The moment that shout resounded, a bright light burst out from inside its mouth. It was a spell that invoked a supreme ruler into the ring containing the spell and caused a strong force to explode, subjugating the vengeful spirit. Since it was a ring containing a spell and it exploded from the inside, its power was enough to make even it, who had been endlessly transformed, suffer from the exploding spell power. However, this wasn't enough to subdue it, whose grade was high. Its body, which had been suffering, temporarily distorted but still retained its form. Swish. But thanks to being momentarily weakened, the chains binding its body scattered and disappeared. At that moment, Mok Jae-un launched his body towards its mouth that was opening in pain. What the was this? Jumping into its mouth with his own feet? It tried to chew up Mok Jae-un, who had jumped in, without missing this opportunity. Just then Mok Jae-un reached out his hand towards its throat. Puck. And the mortals are not eternal and the two forms are like a dream. The five aggregates are all empty, and the myriad phenomena are like an illusion. He chanted the mnemonic of the art of binding. It was a gamble. The most direct way to absorb the death chi of this huge lump of resentment. It was targeting the inside of its body. From the outside there was no other way because he was bound by chains. However, swoosh. Mok Jaeungun's body, performing the art of binding, was sucked deep into its mouth as if pushed by weight rather than absorbing its chi. As if there was a hidden space inside its mouth, Mok Jaeungun's body fell deep inside. Swish! Into the darkness like a bottomless pit. Mok Jaeungun's body was sucked towards its origin. In the process, fragments of its memories flowed in like a montage. Big brother. Big brother. I will always be with you. I will support our family as your right-hand man. Don't worry. A brightly smiling younger brother following him. And a strict father. This is for the long-cherished wish of our society. The successors of the other 5 kings have all agreed to participate, so you must also take the lead and join. I will keep that in mind. Soon a familiar place appeared in the memories. As if repeated numerous times, this place visible in the darkness was the valley where the steel marble competition took place. Huff huff. Big brother. Take it. But isn't this the one you found? You go ahead first. I can find another one quickly. Big brother. And another memory continued crawling. Someone strikes the back of his head with a sharp rock. Gasping for breath, he turns his head and there the younger brother who had been brightly following him was looking down at him with a cold gaze. Why? How? Damn bastard. If only you die, everything will be solved. You always acted superior, pretending to sympathize with me just because you had everything. I wasn't. You were just born before me, that's all. With those words, the younger brother struck its face with the rock. As if not satisfied with just once, he struck several times and then disappeared. Along with it, a surging emotion of anger was felt. Soon the following vision was quite different. It seemed to be a memory continuing after death rather than a memory from when it was alive. Let me eat you. Die. Die. I said die. Vengeful spirits rushing in like crazy. Feelings of extreme fear and despair were felt. It gradually intensified. But why me? Why do I have to be eaten like this even after dying? Did I live just to suffer this much? Am I meant to be eaten? Can't be eaten. Will devour everything. Its madness exploded as it was being bitten and eaten by those vengeful spirits. Uaea. The resentment of madness was so strong that it felt like it would be devoured in an instant. At the same time, an unimaginable amount of death chi rushed in through his palm, and the screams of countless resentments echoed in his head. I will devour you too. Its madness was conveyed. Mok Jaeun felt like his head would shatter from the heart-wrenching wails, but he didn't stop the art of binding. The mortals are not eternal and the 2 forms are like a dream. The 5 aggregates are all empty, and the myriad phenomena are like an illusion. Crunch. Swish. The vengeful spirit's head was crushed and eventually incinerated into ashes in the air. The owner of the hand holding the crushed head was none other than Chong Ryong. Chong Ryong, emitting a blood-red gaze, shouted at the whirlpools narrowing in as if to surround her. If you're desperate to be annihilated, come at me as much as you want. You young ones. At her shout, the whirlpools stopped moving as if hesitating. She thought they were finally feeling fear after she had annihilated about 7 entities equivalent to the yellow spirit level, but, swish. At that moment, a tremendous amount of death chi spread in all directions. At this she frowned and looked. Could it be? The origin of this was none other than the huge whirlpool. Cracks suddenly appeared in that whirlpool nearing the end of its transformation, and all the power it had been condensing burst out. These whirlpools had stopped moving in response to this. And they all moved towards that thing trying to reveal its form as the cracks widened and split. Shit. She had barely diverted their attention, but it was quite troublesome. If it was like this, there was no point in deliberately deploying the ghost realm, the blood boundary. At that very moment, swish, swish, countless chains emerged from the split cracks and indiscriminately restrained the whirlpools approaching it and the numerous vengeful spirits nearby. Their strength was so great that the vengeful spirits undergoing transformation couldn't move an inch. Even the few entities reaching the green spirit level were the same. Even they couldn't resist the chains and soon swoosh. They were sucked into the place where the cracks had opened while still bound. She could instinctively guess why this phenomenon occurred. Is it trying to be completed? Finally, the goo poison was about to be born. It was trying to fill in the lacking parts by devouring whatever it encountered and transform into the most ideal, no, the worst form. Just then a thick chain flew towards her. Not satisfied with devouring the whirlpools, it was targeting Chong Ryong. In the end it failed? She muttered while looking at the flying chain. The red thread connecting them was shaking violently. This was a phenomenon indicating that the life of the master was in a critical state. If the red thread kept shaking like this and incinerated, she would also be annihilated in the same way. Swish. The chain tried to coil around her body. Then she swung her long pipe. At that moment, the tip of the chain that was about to touch her crumbled and started burning up. Poof. Chong Ryong's body also followed the crumbling chain and launched towards the whirlpool where the cracks were opening. Swish. Swish. Numerous chains spewed out to catch her, but puck, puck. They were all repelled by the long pipe she swung. Eventually, she passed through the place where the cracks had opened and entered inside. In the center of the place where the chi of resentment was swirling like a torrent as if a storm was raging, an entity covered in chains was visible. The screams of the resentments that had been dragged in first echoed in her ears like a resonance. Run away. Run away. Run away. The resentment has reached its end. A being with deep despair's blue malice is being born. Green malice. It meant that its grade had reached the green spirit level. Originally, it was the worst vengeful spirit that could only be born after 100 years or when that deep resentment continued, but it was artificially being completed into a goo poison by making them devour each other. Swoosh. As even the screaming vengeful spirits were sucked in, the chains covering the entity became thicker. At this, she snorted and muttered, "The young one is being presumptuous. As if someone hasn't experienced that." Along with that, as Chong Ryong set foot on the ground, blood droplets surged upward from the center. With each step it spread in all directions. Then as it collided with the realm of the chained entity, the space rippled here and there, and blue flames rose like tree roots burning. Crack crack crack. Chong Ryong's blood-red eyes gradually deepened. "If you don't hand over that kid, you will be annihilated here the moment you are born. You young one." The chi greatly intensified. Right at that moment, as Chong Ryong was about to take another step, the chained entity suddenly twisted its body back and forth. Condensed chi of resentment was strongly spewing out through the gaps. Flang, flang. Was it doing that because the goo poison was about to be completed? As she was thinking that, the chains surrounding the creature tightened around itself, as if strangling itself. What? The process of transformation was exceedingly bizarre. As she wondered, cracks suddenly appeared on the chains that had been constricting. Crack. A single crack. It became two and slowly, rapidly multiplied. Soon the cracks reached the point where the chains shattered and clattered to the ground. Was the completed goo poison finally revealing itself? Swoosh. Chong Ryong raised her long pipe and prepared to face it. At that moment, as all the chains fell off, a figure revealed itself. It was none other than Kid Mok Jae-young. Her eyes narrowed. Gugu. The tremendous death chi emanating from his body was condensed as if it would explode at any moment. Could it be that the completed goo poison had taken over his body? Chong Ryong spoke with a voice tinged with anger, aiming her long pipe. "Foolish thing. Were you finally devoured?" At that question, Mok Jae-young's lips twitched, then he opened his mouth while looking at Chong Ryong. "I wasn't devoured, I devoured it."